Ever since Bill Haley's Rock Around the Clock sparked a worldwide revolution in the mid-1950s, pop culture has required knowledgeable, passionate, and experienced mood setters to echo and celebrate the changing face of music. I'm Paul Gambaccini. In 1973, I joined Radio 1 at a pivotal time for British radio. I wasn't alone in the revolution. Whether it was the daring sound of pirate stations, including Radio Caroline, the overt commercialization of Capital Radio, or the intimate atmosphere of local radio, the wireless has always cultivated personalities for every style and mood. In this series, Josh and the team talk to some of the pioneers of music presentation. He will relive some of the moments that defined the British music scene with the figures who saw them and discover the secrets to their longevity. It's time to dust off the record player, adjust your aerial, and fire up the jukebox as we shine a light on the legends of radio, exclusively on Beyond the Title.
Okay. There we go.
Excellent. So we'll get on to your major achievements in a second, but we're talking a year on from your high-profile announcement that you were leaving Radio 2. What have you made of the public reactions surrounding your move? And after 45 years working for the corporation, what conclusions have you made about your BBC tenure?
Well, I'm completely shocked by the response. I thought, an old bloke leaves a job he's been doing for a long time. I thought more people were saying, well, yeah, thank goodness he's going, or about time, or something like that. So I was really shocked by the response and the continuing response. It's really, the interest has been much, much more than I ever thought. I didn't realize that radio was still such a story as it appears to be in the news agenda. So, yeah, that really did surprise me. And I thought it would be a two-day wonder, but it carried on for quite a long time. It's now starting to just dissipate a bit, and that's quite welcome for me. I don't like being in the newspapers or on the front pages or anything at all like that. So I'm quite happy if everything just calms down a bit now. Yeah. But after 40 odd years working at the BBC, it's funny. I mean, it just felt like time to leave. I'd been there obviously a long time, and most people of my age who were there when I was younger had retired or moved on a long time ago. So it didn't feel like a major wrench. It just felt like the right time. And I thought, well, I was really quite lucky to have the opportunity to go and work somewhere else. So I thought, well, why not? You'd be daft, daft not to do it. I've always had that kind of attitude of, if something looks good, looks terrific, and it feels right, and everything about it is right, then why not? You'd be a fool not to do it. So I thought, it's time for a change. Time just to jerk me out of my complacency a bit, if you like, and try something new and see if it worked. And I'm pleased to say, so far, touch wood, it has worked.
Yeah, I'd say so.
You
So recently, Josh interviewed Zoe Ball, and apparently you hadn't had a leaving party, but have you had one by now?
Well, I gave myself a little leaving party when I left. I organised my own, and I just got a few friends to round to a pub, and we had a nice afternoon of a couple of drinks, and then we went home. So I'm not a great one for parties, and certainly when it comes time to give a speech, I really don't want to do that. So it was just right what we did. Nice drinks, nice people there, and a quietish do. So I preferred to slip away reasonably quietly rather than have a big do and anything, fanfares and trumpets. I didn't want any of that. So I had the exact kind of party that I wanted. So I won't be having another, put it that way.
So looking at the stats, your time slot on Greatest Hits Radio has seen a 3.9 million average listenership, which is over double the average of the year before for Greatest Hits Radio, and has been cited as the largest ever audience increase over a single quarter for the organisation. When you hear those numbers, how does that make you feel?
Well, I don't really believe the numbers. I've never bothered too much about numbers when it comes to audience figures, because you're really only broadcasting to one person at a time. So, when you're told there are X people listening, it doesn't change what you do, or it shouldn't change what you do. So I still do the same kind of program, assuming there are just, a couple of people listening to it. And people I know quite well. That's the kind of attitude I take towards how I broadcast. So it's really just the same program I would do if I were, on at 1 a.m. on Muckle Flugger Lightship radio, that sort of thing, and nobody was listening except a seagull and a seal. I would still be doing the same kind of program, I think. So I hope I don't take too much notice of the numbers. It's very, very gratifying, of course, if people say, you've done this has happened. But I think when you start to think, I've done this, then it all starts going wrong. So I'll just carry on in the same way as I'm doing. And if everybody else is happy about the way the numbers are heading, that's very important and it's very pleasing. But it's not something I follow avidly. And if the numbers went down again, I would just shrug my shoulders and get on with doing what I was doing before.
Looking at your BBC Radio tenure as a whole, how do you think the evolution of interactivity between the station and the audience came about? And how do you think you contributed to breaking down the conservative discourse of the 50s and 60s BBC Radio that was the mainstay of the 1980s broadcasting?
Well, I started in the 70s, and when I started in radio in Scotland, I was a staff announcer, which meant I read the news and I was the continuity voice. And at the time, they wanted us to sound very much like the, not 50s quite, but 60s, 70s. We didn't break down the walls at all. And so I made myself into a formal broadcaster, and I wanted to obey the rules and do everything just right and speak the Queen's, as it was, English, and I did. I spoke with what they term received pronunciation when I was reading the news, a Scottish version of it, but still, pretty formal. And so I wasn't there to say, this is all new, we're all going to do something new. I learnt the rules by the old book and made sure that I knew how to do that properly before I went into programs, making programs and presenting programs. I was a formal BBC voice. So to that extent, I didn't break down any barriers at all. When I got onto Radio 2 as a presenter, I was still, I think if you listen to me back then, I would sound a little more English than I do now. So it's just been a very gradual thing. I've been getting back to my natural accent slowly over the last 30 odd years. Certainly over for the last 20 odd years, I've been using my natural accent. So it's, it has changed slightly, but I have not been somebody who's been determined to bring Radio 2, drag it into the current century. I was just going along with how things happen. And I think you have to, on a station, listen to what everybody else is doing. Make sure you fit in your own style. But don't come in and say, I'm going to change the sound of this station, because you probably won't. And you'll just get everybody else's backs up. So you just come in and do what you do and hope that it fits in with what everything else around you sounds like. But also things do change, the kind of things that people said in the 80s on radio, a lot of it just wouldn't be acceptable now. Tastes change. I was just talking to somebody about this earlier today, about how certain words have lost their power to shock. You can say more, But on the other hand, there are some words in broadcasting that actually have become more shocking that you can't use, and quite rightly. So things have changed, and you just have to be aware of the change in how the public are wanting you to behave and how everybody around about you behaves. And as long as you're aware of what's going on, then you still sound as if you're relevant, and you still sound as if you're not you're not living in the past. So that's generally what I've been doing. But things do change, and the smart broadcaster, the wise broadcaster, moves to a certain extent with the times. And I always think if they asked me to read the news now on a radio station, I would sound, because I'd go back into my old newsreading ways, and I would sound like a 1980s news, because that's the last time I did it. I haven't been doing it since then. And similarly, if you ask somebody who hasn't presented a program since the 1970s to come in and do one now, they would probably sound a bit dated unless they'd really been paying attention, because your muscle memory, what you do every day, stays with you. And because I've been doing radio programs every day on Radio 2 and now on Greatest Hits Radio, I like to think I'm still sounding reasonably relevant and reasonably fresh.
Like so many titans of radio, you began your career on hospital radio. Why do you think this remains a popular route in broadcasting, and what did it teach you about creating a rapport with your audience?
Oh, it's the very foundation of what I do now. I was obviously a radio listener before I got into hospital radio, but when I got on there, I realized very, very quickly, it's not about doing the program that you want to do. It's about doing what your listeners, what your audience want you to do. And I went in there thinking, I know what, I'll play all sorts of latest pop music from the mid-70s. That'll really shake things up. That's not what's wanted at all. Hospital radio, you listen to your audience. The audience said, I want to hear this. And you would play it. You just played it, because if they wanted to hear Jim Reeves singing Distant Drums, you played that. If you wanted Elvis Presley singing The Old Rugged Cross, then that's what you gave them. And obviously you put in some other things to reflect your own personality. But if you don't listen to your audience, then it's not worth doing. You've got to know who you're speaking to, what they want, and you can take them along with you. If you're wanting to introduce them to something new, of course you can. You can do that sort of thing. But you've got to be listening to who your audience are and what they want. And that's what hospital radio taught me. And the very closeness of you to your audience, the very direct communication that you had, then that stayed with me as well, because I realized from that point on that you are speaking to somebody, and you can really make a big difference to their day just by mentioning their name on the radio. So don't mess about with it. Do it properly. Respect your audience, and that's stayed with me all the way through. Hospital radio still today is providing a terrific service. I know in most hospitals, television is available in wards and in rooms, but still, it's still there. Hospital radio is still going on. Several years ago, 30 odd years ago, people were saying, well, once they get televisions in the rooms, nobody will want to listen to hospital radio. Well, the opposite is true. People don't really want to. They do watch television, but the hospital radio service is still providing a vital function. And most hospital radio stations in the country are thriving. They're still doing really well. Short of money, serving their audience and doing it well. So that's been the surprising thing, that radio is still, and it's not just hospital radio, radio generally is still a major form of communication. And I think obviously I think it's a great form of communication, but I'm just heartened to see that it's still there and still important.
We were talking to the great Michael Aspel recently about his days as a continuity announcer when they were in Vision, and I suppose this is something you can relate to when you were CA for BBC One Scotland. In what ways does the anonymity of a CA help to create the perfect testing ground for you to hone your style as a broadcaster?
Well, I think it was a terrific, great training ground for me, because Uh, the the whole point of being a continuity announcer is it's not about you. It's about what you're presenting. It's the programs that are coming up, the programs that have just happened. And so you're there to be a helpful voice, a friendly voice, and to offer information. But it's not about you. People have not tuned in to hear you saying, this is BBC One. They've tuned in to see and hear the next program. And so that was a great lesson, again, when I was working in BBC Scotland, that it's the programs, it's not you. You do your job properly. And, if you want to add a little personality, then, you can, but only a little. People don't like announcers who get too matey or try to be too funny. It's treat the job seriously, do it properly. You can slip in a witty remark or a witty link occasionally, but basically you're there to say, this is BBC One, and now Star Trek. And that's it. That's the job. So I enjoyed doing that, and it was really a fantastic job. I absolutely loved it. I don't think I could have done it forever, but I could have done it for a long time, certainly. And I really enjoyed it. And I always felt as if I sort of left that too soon. And there was a bit more to do. But, you do what people ask you to do, and you move on when they ask you to. So that's basically what happened to me.
Yeah.
In 1978, you secured a presenting role in the cultural affairs programme Nightbeat alongside Ian Purden and a certain Charles Nove, who would play a pivotal part in your career. What were your first impressions of him?
Charles Nove was a remarkable man, still is, because I was in my late 20s by the time he started. He started in his teens, and he was on a radio. BBC Radio Scotland was a national network as far as we were concerned, and it certainly was. And he was, I think, the youngest announcer on network radio at the time. And since I think he was only 20 when he went to Radio 2 as an announcer, and he was the youngest there as well, youngest on national radio. So he's a remarkable fellow, because when I started in hospital radio, he was already there, and he was about, 14, 15, something like that. And he was already a trusted hand there. He was a responsible person. And even though he was in the school uniform, he had that voice already. He sounded exactly the same way as he does now. And he's been a friend of mine ever since then. And I think he's a great broadcaster. In fact, most mornings when I'm driving to the station, after I've listened to Greatest Hits Radio in the house, I get in my car, drive to the station, and I have Charles on Scala Radio, and I listen to him. So that link has continued, and he is just such a natural broadcaster. He's got it in spades, and easy to listen to, and that's what makes a great broadcast.
So Charles did an episode with Colin Edmonds on his podcast Behind the Scenes, and Josh knows Colin Edmonds very well, and he keeps trying to ask him for an interview. Josh would like Charles on this podcast here as well.
But they'd both be very, very good guests. Separately, they've both got lots to say.
Yeah.
They've known Charles since the 70s. Colin, not quite so long, but Colin is a brilliant man, and I'm sure you know that he and Bob Monkhouse worked very, very closely together for so many years. Colin is fond of stories, and he'd be a great guest because he's done it all. He's met everybody. And he's a funny guy. He's I got him to write a couple of scripts for me when I was doing some award ceremonies. And the gags that he provided were just priceless.
Yeah.
One of his favorite ones, or my favorite ones of his, was I was saying I work for Radio 2, as I did at the time, Radio 2, 88 to 91. which is, of course, the average age of all the presenters, because we had Desmond Carrington there at the time, so it wasn't far off. Yeah, Colin, lovely guy. He'll do a very good episode for you, definitely.
Joining Radio 2 still in the era before Matthew Bannister's Radio 1 revolution, what was the general attitude towards the purpose of national radio at this time? And as someone who was on the alternative station, how important was it for Radio 2 to offer something different?
Well, I think there should be always a clear division between Radio 1 and Radio 2. There should be clear blue water, as they say in politics, between what each station is doing. Radio 1 should be serving 15 to 30 age group, and Radio 2 should be serving 35 plus, not really any younger than that. But it's a state of mind. Radio 2, you get, it's not so much about the music that's being played, I don't think. It's about the state of mind you're in. You move from being a youngster who's interested in going to clubs and meeting people and having a great time to become somebody with a career and very often a family and responsibilities. And it's a state of mind, and you're more comfortable with yourself, so you don't mind being uncool when you're over 35. And that's whenever Radio 2 started to think of itself as being cool, I always said, stop. That's the worst thing we can do. We need to be cool. That's our unique telling. And the Matthew Bannister time, that was, it was a change that was needed at Radio 1, because Radio 1 and 2 were becoming almost interchangeable. You had slightly older broadcasters, and they were playing, slightly more middle of the road music than perhaps they should have been. So yeah, it was time for a change there. But I mean, it happened very, very suddenly and quickly, and that's never a good thing with radio stations. Changes should be, as one of my former controllers at Radio 2 said, that it should be changes in broadcasting should be like a porcupine making love. It should be done very slowly and very carefully. That was his mind. Right.
You definitely made me feel my age just a moment ago. I turned 35 last year, and it has become apparent to me that I find Radio 1 is just not for me anymore, and Radio 2 and other stations are more for me now. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think you
stay with the same station all your life. You just you change, you grow up, you get interested in other styles of music, and so that's there's plenty of choice for everybody out there. You just find the station that's right for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Josh hasn't listened to Radio 1 since the Chris Moores days. It's a long time ago.
But Moores, of course, is still on daily radio on radio. So it's people move away from Radio 1 or Radio 2. And they find another life elsewhere. And I think listeners can do that too.
Yeah. You became a regular presenter for Radio 2 in January 1984 for the Saturday late night show, in addition to your show on Radio Scotland. What was the process you used to cultivate your style for a larger audience, and how easy was it to nurture a rapport with the Radio 2 audience?
Well, I didn't massively change my style, although the program I was doing in Scotland was very heavy on interviews. So I wasn't really doing much, just simple music presentation. So actually, when I got the show on Radio 2, the Saturday Late Show, it was just a pure music show. So it was actually quite nice for me just to sort of get back to doing that again, just to being a DJ. So I really enjoyed that. And the thing I found was that not so much on the Late Show. When I first did my first sitting in for Ray Moore, which was, I think, 1982, it's a lovely man, Ray, and I became a great friend. He and his wife, and my wife at the time, we all, socialized together great friendship. But at that time when I was sitting in, he said the week before, this chap Ken Bruce is coming in next week. Why don't you make him feel welcome, send him a nice card or two. And so when I arrived on the Monday morning to do that week, there was a batch of postcards and letters from people just saying, welcome along. I hope you have a nice time. You know, we love listening to Radio 2. Hope you enjoy your time. And that sort of immediately relaxes you. It made me feel certainly very welcome. And of course, it gives you something to work off. You've got names and addresses. People say writing things, telling you what they're doing. So it gave me lots to do. And that was always the case with Radio 2. The audience were always very, very appreciative of your efforts. And also wanting to make it a dialogue. That was the best thing about it. It was a two-way conversation. It wasn't just, you sitting in the studio spouting rubbish and people sitting at home listening to it. They were contributing and writing in stuff that you could use. And although, as I said, it was all letters in those days, no phone calls or, way before things like even faxes. So there was no instant reaction to anything. If you said something on Monday, you wouldn't read a reaction until Wednesday because, somebody might write you a postcard. That was all postcards then to the BBC. They'd post it on Monday. It would arrive at the BBC on Tuesday. It would go through the process and it would be in your program box on the Wednesday. So you had to keep threads going in the conversation. If you picked up a subject, went with it, it would be, Wednesday before you could return to it or the day after. And so you had to keep these different threads going in conversation terms and wait 2 days for a response. Since the advent of emails and texts and stuff like that, of course, you get a response just instantly within seconds. So that's changed completely. That kind of immediate response has changed. But the nature of the conversation hasn't really. It's still you sitting in the studio, you say something, and somebody responds to it, and you run with that a bit. And it is very definitely a conversation between two or more people. So the means of transmission has changed, but the basic structure of a program like that is just the same as it was 40, 50 years ago.
Really more to so
Ray, what?
way more to so
Didn't Ray Moore do Come Dancing?
Absolutely right. Ray was the voice, as he always put it, muttering in the undergrowth of Come Dancing. And he did other voiceovers for television, for instance, things like award ceremonies and variety club lunches when they used to televise those. He was always the commentator, and he loved doing that. He was really good at that. And he was also the commentator for radio for the Eurovision Song Contest until he became ill. And then I was drafted in just to take over for 1 year while he got better. Sadly, he didn't get better, so he couldn't return to the job, and I carried on doing it. But it was always, as far as I was concerned, I was just sitting in for a year until he felt better. But yeah, he was a brilliant commentator and a brilliant voice man. As well as having a great personality for radio, he could do commercial voiceovers and ads and stuff like that. And he was one of the people, which I did for a little while as well, who did the not the continuity on BBC One for national television, but the promotions, the things that went programs tonight on BBC One at 7:20, that sort of thing. Then they were done live. These voiceovers were done live to a pre-filmed sequence. But they had to be done live in case something changed at the last minute. So he did that for years and years and years and was brilliant at it. He was a terrific live broadcaster. And as you say, he did Come Dancing. He did lots of other things on television. But radio was his first love. And I think that's the same for me.
Terry Wogan is someone who was seen as your contemporary, and I used to love listening to your handovers, which became legendary, if slightly naughty. But in what ways do you think he forged a pathway for broadcasting, which people like yourself built on throughout the succeeding years?
Oh, Terry was very definitely a trailblazer. There's no doubt about that. He changed the sound of national broadcasting because most presenters, most disc jockeys up till then had been, either slightly wacky, oh, hey, look at me, it's a little unreal, the kind of Radio 1 DJ. I don't think there were any people who actually were like that, but it was what was expected of Radio 1 DJs to be, yeah, here we are, what a fantastic day. Actually talking but not saying anything. But when he did his presentation, it was stuff that meant something. There was something in every link. He had a communication with you in every link, and he built something into it, something clever, something funny, something to make you laugh, every link that he said. So he definitely changed the sound and style of British broadcasting. I think Ray Moore did too. I mean, I think he brought his own particular style, but it was, again, very direct, very friendly, warmth, huge warmth coming over the airwaves. And you honestly felt that not only was he speaking to you, but you and he had a real kind of understanding. Oh, he gets me, I get him. So that's a really close bond you form if you think, oh, I know what this guy's like. And that Ray had that for me, Terry had that for me, and I think between them they absolutely changed and made life a lot easier for people who were coming along like me. And I found that that kind of broadcasting was what I wanted to do. You find your own way of doing it. And certainly it seems to have worked for me so far. But I owe it all to them, really, for making that kind of broadcasting acceptable.
In 1993, your Radio 2 slot was extended and became arguably the show that defined your career. Daytime radio is packed with traffic updates, news bulletins, and network features which contractually you're obligated to honour. But in what ways were you able to use these features as part of your light-hearted comedy patter?
I think you try your best anyway to build anything you have to have in your program, build it in and make not just a necessity of it because it's there, but to actually make it part of your program and to enhance it and for it to enhance your program. A travel bulletin, originally when I started doing them, we read them ourselves. And, again, Ray Moore was brilliant at just making a bit of fun out of them. He would, he wouldn't sort of interfere with the message. He would say, there's there'd be the travel news script would say, there's a burst sewer in the Lewisham Road. And he would say, so there's the burst sewer in the Lewisham Road, there's a big hole and a terrible smell in Lewisham. And that's what he would do with that and make it, more personal, more part of his program. And then later, of course, after that, we got travel people in to do it. And I found, certainly, when I started doing it with Lynn Bowles, we had a terrific rapport. And thought in the same way, made each other laugh, which is crucial. And hopefully we made the audience laugh at times as well. So the danger is if you're laughing with somebody else, it becomes a bit exclusive. And your audience think, well, what are they laughing at? Why are they finding this so funny? So you have to make sure you're bringing in the audience, that they're part of the joke as well. They're in on it. And as long as you do that, then yes, it is great to have somebody else in the studio with you. But I find quite often that if you've got somebody in the studio, the temptation is just the two of you to talk to each other and forget that there's somebody else in the conversation. And provided you remember they're there, then it will work.
So you just touched upon the next question, actually. Britain has enjoyed many double acts over the years, from Morecambe and Wise to Stan and Hilda Ogden. And as you just said, you were part of an enduring on-air partnership. So what was the secret to your friendship with the great Lynn Bowles? What impact does it have when you really get on with the person you're broadcasting with? And how do you think your chemistry became another aspect of the show?
Well, I didn't know Lynn until she was introduced to me as the new travel presenter. And I don't know. At the time, I liked to make fun of people, without, I hope, being cruel. But what I found very quickly was that Lynn was rather better than I was at making fun of somebody else, i.e., me. So she, gave as good as she got, if not better, and certainly she gave better very often. So that was really attractive to me. When you're doing a little bit of niggling at somebody, if they get offended, it's not funny anymore. Or if they can't respond in like manner, that's not funny either. So with Liz, he was able to take what I was saying and come back stronger at me, and so that we thoroughly enjoyed working with each other. I don't think we ever had a crossword, to be honest. But eventually, the hours and her domestic situation sort of led her to think she doesn't want to be working in London anymore. So that was the end of our enduring relationship. But we had a great time, and I still see Lynn occasionally. We still exchange a text or two, and we're just the same as ever we were. So it was a great day the moment she came on the program, because it made for a special teamwork, and I thoroughly enjoyed every day going into work with her.
How long did you work together?
How long did you work together?
I'm just trying to think how long it was. It must have been 15 years anyway. It's very difficult because I can't remember dates terribly well. I'm very good on dates around about the 70s, 80s, and early 90s. And after that, they just all merge into one. I think, well, was that 20 years ago? No, it was 40 years ago. I think it was about 15 years. It may have been more, but it was a long running relationship, and it was great fun. Always great fun.
Let's hope you not running here out.
Let's hope you're not 1 year out.
Very good line.
So that pushes us on to the next question. We've got to question 12 without mentioning the P word. Although radio is full of competitions, interactive games and features, BBC Radio isn't known for its massive commercial giveaways. But in 1998, you spearheaded a quiz which would become a radio institution. In what ways has Popmaster exceeded your expectations, and what do you think is the secret to its success?
It's massively exceeded my expectations, because I thought back in 1998 we'd have a quiz for about 6 months. And after that, we'd find something new. It's a great rule of radio that if things, are just okay or they're not working, then you can stop doing them and nobody really notices. You can change it. Yeah, change it. Doesn't really matter. If something's good, you run with it. So after about 6 months, we thought this is going quite well. So we carried on running with it and running with it and running with it. And eventually, we realized we had something quite important there. And so we thought, well, what are the important aspects of this quiz? It should be difficult, but not impossible. People should be able to score, the average person should be able to score quite well, but not get full marks or anywhere near it, but score quite well. And we don't want to have massive prizes. It's just about the taking part. And that's almost unchanged since then. We still don't have massive prizes. It is still about taking part and challenging yourself. It's not necessarily about challenging the person you're against. It's just about getting a good score with your set of questions. And although I don't play golf, I haven't for years and years, it's a bit like golf. You're playing against yourself. You're playing the course. You're playing the questions. Your opponent, is there. It's a fair game. You're not out to do them down. You're just out to do the best you can. And you don't cheat, because you don't cheat at golf, even though you could, and nobody would know. No, you're honest. You play an honest game. And so that seems to me to be the same principle as Popmaster runs on. And I think a lot of people they like to think that they are really smart about pop music. Yeah, I know quite a lot about pop. I know my music, A lot of people think that. And so they like to come on and have a go at it. And some days it works brilliantly. and some days they can't answer anything, even though they do know quite a lot. So it's a great leveler, and I think people enjoy playing on air, but equally they enjoy playing at home or in the car, listening along and shouting out the answers. It's a fun thing. But I think the important thing is the quality has to be. We've tried to keep the quality high. We don't want to make it university challenge, but it should be, as robust as university challenge as a quiz. It should be something that you don't get mistakes in. If we say something is a year, a particular place in the charts, we've got to be right about it. We've got to get that right. Occasionally, a mistake will slip through, but we should be absolutely on it. And I think that's what appeals to people. It's not an easy quiz, but it's a playable quiz. And we all like to think we know a bit more than the next person about popular music. So long may it carry on.
Josh would love to take part in Popmaster, but I don't think he doesn't think he'd be able to do the 3 and 10 because he can't speak very quickly.
No, sure we could find a way. The technology must come to our aid in this. We need to find a way of getting that to work. One day, I'm sure we will.
And for the last few years, Popmaster has been extended to a bank holiday bonanza. How difficult was it to present all-day Popmaster?
It was a difficult thing, all-day Popmaster, because we were doing it from 7:30 in the morning every hour until 6:30 at night. So certainly, from my point of view, it was just a bit of a marathon day. However, from Phil Swan, his point of view, he writes the questions, and it was that was a tall order. I mean, how many is that? He was doing 20 questions each hour for how many? Well, that's a hell of a lot of questions, which he delivered and still does every day for us. So it was harder for him, I think, but it was a big audience puller, and particularly during the lockdown years, when a lot of people were at home, it was a big thing for them. Just to have the daily Popmaster was a big thing for them. But when we did the bank holiday ones, people kept coming back every hour. You could see the audience figures really spiking every hour, half hour. So it was a great thing, but like everything, it had to be special because as soon as the first one had happened, we had the people upstairs saying, "Oh, can we do another one for the next bank holiday?" Saying, "No. We'll wait a year. We'll do it the next May bank holiday, but don't do it if you do it every 3 months, you lose the special part. Use what's important and what's interesting and unusual about it. If you just keep doing it, then you go back to the well too often and the well runs dry. So we just said, we'll do it once a year. And since I went to Greatest Hits Radio, we've been talking about it as a possibility, but I'm sort of a bit wary at the moment. I don't know that we need it just at the moment. So we might revisit it one time, but for the time being, it's in its little box. And it was a great thing, though, when we did it. And it was lovely to see so many people taking part and listening and having a great time with it. So, yeah, we're very proud of that one.
So while at Radio 2, you also became the presenter of the legendary Friday Night is Music Night, showcasing the very best of the BBC Concert Orchestra alongside friends of this podcast, Mike Dixon and Colin Edmonds. We always have to give those guys a mention. Anyway. Yeah, otherwise they'll moan at Josh. So, as a broadcaster, how do you go about changing your broadcasting style to cater for different types of programming?
Well, I think that goes right back to what I started as a staff announcer, because in the course of a week, when I was a continuity announcer, well, you did continuity maybe one day. You were newsreading the next day. So these are slightly, although they're complementary, they're slightly different skills. And then the next day you could be presenting a symphony concert, and then you could be doing the announcements on a comedy program the day after that. So it was a very, very varied experience. And certainly when the all-day Radio Scotland started in 1978, we were newsreading. I was one of the newsreaders still at the time, even though I was doing some programs. I was still a staff man. And in the course of the morning, you had to do news reads from 7 in the morning to midday or later. And you had to do 3 different styles of news reading in that shift. So you'd start off with a Radio 4 style read, which is quite stiff and formal, in the Good Morning Scotland programme. And then between 9 and 11, we had a consumer programme. So the read was more of a Radio 2 type of read then. And then from 11 till 1, we had a pop music program. So your read was a Radio 1 kind of read then. It was really upbeat, pacey, and a fast read and bright. So you had to get used to very quickly doing slightly different styles of broadcasting all the time. So to get into the Friday night is music night style was quite easy, really. You're standing in front of an audience, you're wearing a dinner jacket, as we always did. And so, it just leads you into reading a script, which, I 99 times out of 100, I wrote the script myself. Occasionally, I think Colin Edmonds wrote me one script, which was when I was I was doing too much one week to be able to write the script for myself. So I got Colin to write me that one. And I didn't use him again because he was frankly much better than my scripts. So that he was far too. So, it was also expensive, so I thought, no, I don't need. But Colin, lovely man, and Mike Dixon very often was the conductor, and Mike's a brilliant musician, and so many different styles. Again, it's the same thing. But for a musician, he's able to do music that is symphonic, like the great works of Mozart. He can do show tunes, and he can do the best of the British light music scene, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, Mike's got a huge variety of styles that he can call upon as well. And that's what I liked about Friday Night's Music Night, that it wasn't just one style of music. You got quite a range of stuff there, all within the orchestral style. So I had great fun doing that program, and really, really enjoyed it.
So a few years back, Josh was actually there in person when an episode was being filmed with Mike doing what he does, and you may have been there.
Well, yeah, I did. I didn't do them all, far from it, but I used to do probably 12 a year out of 40. So I did maybe a few more. So I did quite a few of them, and I'm sure it was a great show. I'm sure you agree, Josh. It was a great show to watch as well as because to see an orchestra, just doing it what it does so brilliantly, and they really worked hard, the BBC Concert Orchestra, because they usually didn't even see the music until that day. So they came into the studio, wherever it was, Golders Green or the Mermaid or wherever, and they just have the music put in front of them, and they sit and play it because they're just brilliant sight reading musicians, and they can get it to sound as if they've been playing it all their lives because they're really, really accomplished musicians. So it was a great show to watch. I'm sorry they don't do that sort of show so very much these days. I think there is the odd one still, but it seems to have withered on the vine a bit, which is a shame because I felt I loved doing it in a really great program.
So beyond Popmaster, the other mainstay of your Radio 2 morning show was Tracks of My Years. Looking at these interviews as a whole, what do you think they teach us about the evolution of celebrity culture?
Well, I tried to make these interviews, Tracks of My Years, more about what people felt than about who they were. I wanted them to explain why the music was so good for them, how they, how they got the music within them, and how they could explain why it was good to other people. Musicians themselves generally love doing that. They like sharing their enthusiasms. When it wasn't a musician, maybe it was a little different. We were more kind of biographical. But I never felt it was about their lives. It was about why the music was important to them. And if there were pieces of music that triggered a certain memory, then fine, yes, but take us back to that. But for me, it was more about explaining why music works so well. What is the power of music, and what to listen out for in this piece that you're about to play, which a lot of them, particularly, as I say, the musicians, did. Now, of course, we have a slightly different take on it at Greatest Hits Radio. We do a golden year where people choose 3 songs from a particular year. So that is more about the memories, but mostly golden years is listeners. We do have stars, celebrities doing it, but they have to do it the same way as the listeners. So it is talking about their early lives and not about their brilliant careers so much. And I'm not a believer in celebrity culture. I think everybody does a job, and the fact that somebody does a job that's on film or making records doesn't really change them that much, or you hope it doesn't. So I don't believe in putting people on a pedestal simply because they're famous. Fame is such an ephemeral thing. It's here one minute and gone the next. People who were famous 10 years ago, you haven't heard of since. So it's not something to be aimed for, fame. It's not something to think you're special because you are famous. So if you've got an achievement, of course, that's worth celebrating. But fame for its own sake is not worth celebrating. So I tend to want people who are major achievers and can perhaps give us a clue as to how they've gone about their life and how it happened for them. And that's what I feel is that's the guts of the interviews that I do.
2023 wasn't just a significant year for Ken Bruce, but also Popmaster, as it made its long-awaited transition to TV. What's been the hardest thing about preparing a much-loved quiz for television?
Well, it's making it visual, I suppose. So that really hasn't been... Phil Swan and I, Phil is the questions man, and he writes pretty much all the questions for the television series. And we came up with a sort of great brainstorming thing with the TV production company, 12 Yard, who are brilliant. They are just fantastic TV company. They're so used to doing quizzes. There's so many good people with great ideas that they came up with a format which was sort of respectful of the original Popmaster, but designed a bit more for television. And how they did that, how they came up with it, I just take my hat off to them, because I think it was brilliantly executed. So in the end, I mean, it was a lot of hard work for them, but in the end, it was a fairly natural and easy transition. Certainly for me and for Phil, we felt that doing the TV show was really a comfortable thing. Just slipped into it as if we'd been doing it all our lives, because it felt just like the original Popmaster. And the strength of it is that the people who were taking part, they all knew Popmaster. They're all listeners. And so they got the idea very, very quickly. But like Radio Popmaster, we had people who really did know their stuff, and they just didn't answer. The first round went, the second round went, and they hadn't scored any points. And it was terrible. It was a terrible shame for them. But that's what happened. You just get the wrong run of questions that aren't things you know about. And you know plenty, but it's just not your question, so you can drop out. But it's a kind quiz. I think it's not a cruel quiz. We don't have massive prizes similar to the radio version. The prizes are very, very, they're not monetary prizes, and they're not valuable prizes, but they are worth something in terms of achievement. They've got a certain kudos. So that, I think it's gone really well. I'm delighted to say the first season went well, and we've we will be recording a second series in April of this year, and there will be more of them. And that's about as much as I can say just at the moment, I think, because we don't know much more than that. But there'll be another series, and it should be on screen probably around about May.
So I like to mention little bizarre things I've heard about people. And is it true that you run a London bus company with Charles Nove? And if so, how did this come about?
It is true, except it's not true anymore. We did have a bus company where we rented out, hired out London route masters for weddings and parties and stuff like that. We had that business for, I think, about 10 years. But just before lockdown, we decided to wind it up because there were an awful lot of people that come into the same market, and they had very few overheads, and so they were undercutting us. We had an office and a yard, and we're doing everything by the book, and we just felt it was too much. And besides, we all had jobs, proper jobs, apart from doing that. So it was taking up a lot of time. Charles particularly was working really hard at it. So eventually we thought, no, we'll just quietly close down the business and sell off the buses, which we have now. So I don't actually have any buses left at the moment that I can call my own. So I'm not looking for any more, just in case anybody's trying to force you to me. It's very tempting sometimes, but no more buses at the moment. But yeah, we did have that company, and we enjoyed it thoroughly. And it was an interesting thing to do because it was a completely new world for us. But it was fun, and then when it stopped being fun, we stopped doing
it.
Is it true that you used to drive the buses?
Yes, I drove them on occasion. I had the license. I sat the driving test for public carriage vehicles, PCV test, and I did the tests. You had to do some exams. Well, not quite exams, but you had to do some training days, 5 training days every 5 years. So I had to take a week off work and do those to get the test, get my license renewed. I've let the license lapse since then because I really don't do any driving. I don't have any buses. But yeah, I did the odd wedding. I drove for the wedding, and I did a day driving in service in London for when they needed extra buses on a day when there were no trains running. I drove a number 8 bus from Bow Bus Garage to Liverpool Street and back 2 or 3 times that day. So that was good fun. But the traffic was
I go in London and we go on and so you try someone and more
If Josh just said if he happened to be in London during those times and he stepped on a bus and saw you driving it, he would have thought that someone had slipped him something.
Luckily, I don't think I was recognised because I was sitting up at the front in my little cab, and so I didn't have any interaction with the passengers. So maybe that was just as well, I think. I'm afraid my phone has just said it's running out of battery. So
we are almost at the end. We are very
right.
Yeah.
If it's a big off, you'll know. Yeah.
So, penultimate question: looking back at your career, what's your proudest achievement?
That's difficult because I don't think of things as being achievements in those terms. But I was very, very proud to be one of the official BBC commentators for radio on the route of the late Queen's funeral. I felt that was an important thing to be part of, and I felt it was, it was one of the last sort of major things I did at the BBC, but I felt it was a fitting end to my time there. I'd done quite a lot of things. I also went to one of the Olympic Games and 2 Commonwealth Games as part of the sport team, and that was a great thing to do. But yeah, I think that moment, in a commentary box on Mal for the Queen's funeral, I think that that was a fitting end to the whole thing. So yes, I was very proud to be asked to do that.
And just to finish off, what's next for Ken Bruce?
Next for me, I think, is just carrying on doing what I'm doing. I'm not as young as I was. I'm still reasonably fit, I think. So I'll carry on doing a daily show, because daily shows are great to do. You just pick up where you left off the day before, and you're doing the same thing but different every day. And it's a continuing conversation. So you finish on a Friday, you come back on Monday, and it's as if you've never been away. So I like doing daily broadcasting, and I'd like to carry on doing that for as long as I can get out of my bed in the morning. So we'll see. I've got a nice contract at Greatest Hits Radio, which will take me through to 2026. So at that point, we'll see if I'm still happy and if they're still happy, and I might carry on doing it a bit more.
Fair enough. Thank you for today, and we definitely won't see you on a bus anytime soon, right?
Apart from as a passenger, that's the only place. I have my Oyster card in my hand. That's the only way I'll be on a bus.
Thanks for today, Ken. It's been great.
It's a pleasure. Absolute pleasure, Josh. It's wonderful to talk to you, and you're doing a brilliant job there. So carry on doing it. Well done.